Welcome to Congress in Context.
It's good to be here.
So today we are opening the books on the Congressional Record for Monday, January 26, 2026. And, if you're the kind of person who just glances at the daily summary on congress.gov, you might be tempted to just skip this one entirely.
Oh, absolutely. On the surface, it looks like a total non-event. The House wasn't even technically in session.
Right, they were pro forma.
And the Senate met for a grand total of 9 minutes.
9 minutes. I mean, I spend more time than that deciding what to watch on Netflix.
And yet those 9 minutes might actually be the most critical 9 minutes of the entire month.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive. We want to show you why this seemingly sleepy Monday is actually the deceptive calm before a massive legislative storm.
That's right.
Because the machinery in D.C. isn't idling, it is revving up for a deadline.
A huge deadline. We are staring down the barrel of a potential government shutdown, and what we see in this record is the Senate leadership basically frantically trying to clear the tracks for a massive appropriations package.
Okay, so we're going to decode exactly what happened in that short window. We've got a 6-bill spending package that just landed from the House. We have a very strange procedural moment where a senator objects to her own motion.
Yeah, that's a puzzle we definitely need to solve.
And we have some fascinating details tucked away in the committee schedules. Things like Arctic frost and Swiss banks.
It really does sound like a thriller novel, but it's just the legislative calendar.
So let's get right into the centerpiece. The big item on the agenda is a piece of legislation with the catchy title of H.R. 7148.
Right.
For the listener who sees that number and their eyes just glaze over, what exactly are we looking at?
This is the big one. H.R. 7148 is the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act 2026.
Okay, so in plain English.
It's the checkbook. This is the legislation that funds a huge swath of the federal government through September 30.
And when you say huge swath, we aren't just talking about, obscure sub-agencies.
Oh, no. We are talking about the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
This bill covers the Department of Defense, Financial Services, Homeland Security, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education. Wow. If this bill doesn't pass, the lights go out in a very real way across all those sectors.
Now, I noticed something interesting in how this was packaged. It wasn't just H.R. 7148 sitting there by itself. It was processed en bloc. Can you break that term down for us?
Sure. En bloc is just parliamentary French for in a bundle.
Okay.
So instead of voting on 20 tiny procedural things one by one, they bundle them together to save time. And in this case, H.R. 7148, the money bill, was processed alongside S3674.
S3674, that's not about money at all, is it?
No, not really. It is a bill about civil denaturalization for terrorists and fraudsters.
That seems like a really odd pairing. You've got this massive government funding bill to keep hospitals running and soldiers paid.
Yeah.
And then attached to it is this very specific policy bill about stripping citizenship.
It is a bit of a legislative odd couple, you could say. But that is often how things move when time is tight.
You attach the smaller train car to the big locomotive.
Exactly. The leadership knows the appropriations bill has to move, so they hitch other priorities to it to ensure they get across the finish line without a whole separate debate.
Speaking of the size of that locomotive, there was a number thrown out during the proceedings that really, it stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
Senator Susan Collins from Maine, who is basically running the floor, she mentioned the sheer volume of work that went into this package.
It was a staggering statistic. She noted that for these 6 appropriations bills alone, the subcommittees received 31,000 requests from senators.
31,000. I want to pause on that for a second because that number is just hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
That is not 31,000 emails from constituents. That is 31,000 specific requests from the senators themselves.
Correct. Think about the logistics of that funnel.
Yeah.
That is 31,000 requests for, a specific bridge repair in Ohio, a research grant in California, a policy adjustment for a hospital in New York.
Or a writer on a defense contract.
All of it. And someone has to read all of those.
Well, not just read them.
Right, not just read them, adjudicate them. Senator Collins made the point that they had to sift through all 31,000 requests, then reconcile them with the House's version of the bill.
Which has its own mountain of requests, I'm sure.
Of course. And then somehow fit it all under a spending cap that is actually lower than the previous year.
It just highlights the friction in the system. We see 9 minutes of polite talking on the floor, but that represents months of sleepless nights for staff trying to kill or keep those requests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Collins used a very polite phrase to describe this bloodbath. She said, priorities were realigned. difficult decisions were made.
Which is Senate Speak 4.
It means a lot of powerful people didn't get what they wanted, but it was necessary to get a bipartisan vote.
Ah. So she's signaling to her colleagues, hey, if your pet project got cut, it was for the greater good.
Exactly. The greater good of keeping the government open.
So before we move on from the agenda, there was one other bill mentioned for the very next day. S. 3627, the Pregnant Students Fairness Act.
Right. Amidst all the chaos of these, trillion-dollar spending bills, they carved out a specific slot for a cloture vote on that bill for Tuesday evening.
And for anyone new to the term, cloture is basically the vote to stop debating and start voting, isn't it?
Exactly. It is the shut up and vote motion. It requires 60 votes to pass.
So it shows that even in crisis mode, the Senate tries to keep other policy trains moving on parallel tracks.
That's right. They aren't just doing money. They are setting up a vote on student rights as well.
Okay, let's visually set the scene for the listener. It's 3 p.m. on Monday. The chamber is largely empty. Who is actually holding the gavel?
So, presiding over the Senate, sitting in the big chair at the front, is Senator Katie Boyd Britt from Alabama.
She was appointed acting president pro tempore.
Right, by a letter from Chuck Grassley. Usually the president pro tempore is the most senior member, but they rarely sit in the chair for the mundane stuff.
They delegate down.
They do. They designate junior senators to do it. It is actually a rite of passage. You learn the rhythm of the Senate that way. So Senator Britt is in the chair.
And then managing the flow on the floor, doing all the talking, that's Senator Susan Collins from Maine.
Correct. And this is a classic example of the role of a floor manager. Collins isn't just there to hear her own voice. She's the air traffic controller.
Right.
She is framing the narrative, managing morning business, approving the journal of proceedings, basically setting the table for the rest of the week.
So even though the House wasn't really in session that day, they still managed to interrupt the Senate, didn't they?
They did. The Senate received a message from the House. It is essentially a formal stack of paperwork notifying the Senate that the House has passed certain bills and sent them over.
I looked through this list of House bills, and the variety is just wild. It really shows you how broad the federal government's reach is.
It's all over the map. You have H.R. 659, which is about the Board of Veterans' Appeals.
Okay.
And then right next to it, you have H.R. 5764, which is trying to help small businesses utilize artificial intelligence.
Which feels very 2026. A bill to help your local bakery use ChatGPT.
Something like that. Yeah. It is likely about resources and training.
Right.
And then jumping to something completely different. You have H.R. 3496, which deals with microloans for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands.
It's a good reminder. While all the news is focused on the shutdown and the trillions of dollars, the legislative machine is still churning out these tiny bills.
The government is an ocean liner. It has a lot of different decks. Just because the captain is shouting about an iceberg doesn't mean the kitchen stops serving dinner.
Speaking of different decks, I want to pivot to the extensions of remarks.
Yes.
This is a part of the record I think people often overlook because it just sounds like extra paperwork.
And it usually is just the section where members insert speeches they didn't have time for. But in this specific record, it is crucial because it contains the committee schedule.
Right. And if you want to know what Congress is actually worried about, you don't look at the floor speeches.
No, you look at what they're investigating in committee. The floor is for theater. The committee is for work.
So what caught your eye in the schedule? Because some of these titles were intense.
Well, there is a very clear intersection between Washington, D.C. and local disasters. For instance, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations has a hearing schedule titled 1 Year After Disaster, focusing on the Palisades fire.
That's interesting. So that takes a specific local event, a fire, and elevates it to a federal investigation.
It connects federal oversight to a specific community tragedy. They're likely asking, did federal money help? Did federal policy fail?
Why did this happen?
Exactly. It brings the abstract idea of government down to the burnt earth of a specific town.
Then, looking at the Judiciary Committee, we see that hearing you mentioned earlier, Arctic Frost accountability.
Which sounds like a spy movie or, a bad action flick.
It really does. The name's Frost. Arctic Frost.
Sadly, no spies. The subtitle is Oversight of Telecommunications Carriers, so it likely refers to a major service disruption or infrastructure failure during a freeze.
Got it. So they're holding telecoms accountable when the network goes down.
And then there is a commerce hearing on FirstNet's role in public safety.
Which brings it right back to the street level.
Totally. FirstNet is the nationwide broadband network for first responders, so that hearing is directly relevant to every firefighter and EMT in the country.
is the system working when the ambulance is rushing to the hospital?
That's the question.
It is fascinating. But let's go back to Senator Collins. She gave a speech about the Homeland Security part of that big appropriations bill, and I felt the tone shift a lot.
It definitely shifted. Appropriations bills are usually just dry math problems.
Right.
But Homeland Security, that is politically radioactive. It is where the debates about the border and immigration live.
And she didn't shy away from that tension.
No, she didn't. She acknowledged that the bill is being viewed through the lens of a tragedy. She specifically mentioned the tragic death of Alex Preddy.
That is a name that has been in the headlines a lot recently.
It has. And by invoking that name on the record, she is acknowledging the elephant in the room. She knows that for a lot of her colleagues and for the public, the vote on this bill is emotional. It is about safety and loss and border policy.
But then she pivots to a very pragmatic, almost offensive argument.
Right, and this is the why it matters moment. She is trying to preemptively defend the bill to skeptics, probably within her own party.
The ones who might want to vote no because they think it's weak on the border.
Exactly. She explicitly points out that 80% of the funding in this bill is for non-immigration and non-border security functions.
So she's trying to broaden the aperture. She wants them to look away from the border wall for a second and look at the rest of the department.
Precisely. She starts listing off what's in that 80%. She mentions the U.S. Coast Guard, which she notes is vital to her home state of Maine.
And the presiding officer's state of Alabama.
A very savvy move.
Yeah.
She mentions FEMA, referencing a recent horrific storm. She talks about the TSA and cybersecurity.
It is a fascinating rhetorical move. She is basically saying, look, you might be mad about immigration policy, but if you vote against this, you are also voting against the Coast Guard and FEMA right after a disaster.
It is the classic appropriations bind. You have to swallow the parts you hate to fund the parts you need. She's very skillfully reminding the Senate that this isn't just a border bill, it is an infrastructure and safety bill.
And while she's doing that heavy lifting in the Senate, trying to hold this coalition together, we have this contrast with the bills coming over from the House.
That's right. While the Senate is in survival mode, the House sent over some bills that are much more ideological.
Right, like H.R. 2988, which amends ERISA regarding pecuniary and non-pecuniary factors.
Okay, so unpack that. ERISA's retirement money.
Right. And that bill is the battleground for ESG, investing environmental, social, and governance factors. It's a huge culture war issue in finance.
And they also sent over H.R. 6945 about state funds for pregnancy centers.
Exactly. So you have the House sending over these policy statements on very divisive cultural issues, while the Senate is just trying to pass a budget so the TSA agents get paid on Friday.
It really highlights the difference in tempo between the two chambers right now.
Okay, I want to get to the nerdy part. I promised we would unpack a weird moment in the transcript. This is the Rule 43 maneuver.
Ah, yes. The moment that confuses everyone who hasn't read the Senate rulebook cover to cover.
Just set the scene for us.
Senator Collins asked for the second reading of the Appropriations Bill, H.R. 7148. The clerk reads the title.
Okay.
And then Collins immediately says, I object to further proceedings.
Okay, wait. To the untrained ear, that sounds insane. She brought up the bill, asked for it to be read, and then objected to her own bill.
It sounds like she changed her mind mid-sentence. Like she suddenly decided she hated the bill.
Right. Actually, never mind.
But this is actually a very specific, calculated, procedural move known as Rule 14. Rule 14.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Why would you object to yourself?
So, normally when a bill gets its second reading, the rules say it must be referred to a committee.
Which takes weeks, right?
Weeks, sometimes months. They study it, they mark it up, vote on it.
They don't have weeks.
They don't even have days. The funding deadline is imminent. So under Rule 14, if a senator objects to further proceedings after the second reading, the bill bypasses the committee stage entirely and is placed directly on the Senate calendar.
So her objection was actually the gas pedal, not the brake.
Exactly. It is a shortcut. It allows the Senate leadership to grab the bill and put it right on the schedule for a vote. It is a break glass in case of emergency tactic.
That is wild. I object actually means let's hurry up.
Only in the Senate. It basically allows them to skip the line because they know the deal has already been cut in the back room.
And briefly, just to show how weird the schedule is, the House also met that day, but not really.
Right. The record notes the House met for a pro forma session at 12:30 p.m.
This is just satisfying the constitutional requirement, isn't it?
That's all it is. The Constitution says neither chamber can adjourn for more than 3 days without the other's permission. So they can't just go on vacation.
So someone has to go in, bang the gavel, look around at an empty room, and leave just to keep the streak alive.
It is the ultimate meeting that could have been an email.
Truly. It takes about 30 seconds, but it is constitutionally vital.
So let's zoom out. What we saw on Monday, January 26, 2026, was a masterclass in Senate procedure. We saw Senator Susan Collins navigating a minefield.
We really did. She is juggling a massive spending package, using obscure rules like Rule 4/10 to beat the clock,
Acknowledging a tragic death to handle the politics of the border.
and all while ensuring the folks back in Maine and Alabama know that their Coast Guard funding is safe.
It is a reminder of how fragile the system is. We focus on the shouting matches on cable news, but the actual operation of the government relies on these quiet moments where one senator stands up, reads a script, uses a loophole to skip a committee, and just hopes enough people agree with her to keep the checks clearing.
It is precarious. It really is.
And it brings me back to that number, 31,000 requests.
That is the one that stuck with me, too.
When you think about 31,000 distinct needs, a bridge in Ohio, a research grant in California, a microloan in the Mariana Islands, all being distilled down into one yay or nay vote, it really makes you wonder.
That's the question.
The question is about representation. I mean, is it comforting that the system filters all that noise into a single streamlined decision?
Or
Or is it deeply concerning that so few people, really just the leadership and the appropriations chairs, get to make the final call on which of those 31,000 requests survive and which ones die?
that is a heavy thought. We are trusting a very small bottleneck with a massive amount of flow.
We are. And on days like this Monday, you can see the bottleneck tightening. You realize that democracy at this level isn't about grand speeches. It is about traffic control.
Well, on that note, we want to remind you that transparency is still a thing. You can look up these specific remarks, the full text of H.R. 7148, and see exactly which of those 31,000 requests made the cut by going to congress.gov.
It is all there in black and white. And if you are curious about the Swiss banks hearing or Arctic frost, check out the committee schedule for the week of the 26th. It gives you a roadmap of what is keeping senators up at night.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the machinery of government. We will see you next time.
See you then.